Here's two copies of a report that I believe I sent to all you folks this morning. I do apologize for the delay on that. Yes, what I'm referring to is the Venus Alley Restoration Project. Since this transpired, I guess about a month or so ago, Northwestern, as part of their ongoing efforts to replace gas lines through the uptown area, finally got around to Venus Alley. I had put them on notice pretty much every year of the 5 years I've been here. This time of year when digging would occur, as different alleys would get touched, to just realize when you got around to the Venus Alley that one was going to be considered special. Irregardless, when that work came around this year, I committed the project relatively late in the day. By the time I had a chance to look into it, work had already began in terms of removing the brick pavers. These aren't cobblestones, these are brick pavers. They're kind of a different animal. And ultimately the gas line was replaced, and I understand service lines relayed in, and now they're putting the alley back together. The big question, of course, came, do they cover it with asphalt, which is what they've done for pretty much all the other alleys as they've done this kind of work, or in this case, do we require them to restore it with the brick pavers that came from the site? And ultimately, that was what Northwestern Energy agreed to do. They hired a contractor here in town, Jim Johnson of Creek Works, and they've been putting the alley back together as promised. I've been keeping a close eye on the project. It's slow work, tedious work, but I think they're doing an excellent job. And they not only they're putting the alley back in a way that I think will be very historically intact, they'll also address a lot of issues with previous work. Some of the photos show that this alley was not pristine by any extent. Previous work in the alley had already included a fair amount of asphalt and so forth, covering brick pavers, especially down by the M&L supply building and so on and so forth. Plus, there were some pretty significant subsidence or depressions where the bricks over the years had sunken or worn away. So there were some real issues there, in addition to drainage in terms of water. So ultimately, out of this, I think a good situation has emerged. We'll still have a very attractive, historically intact alley when the work is all said and done. Based on what I can see, they're roughly 2/3 of the way back and putting the alley back together. As shown in the photos in my handout there, they're restoring roughly 200 feet of the alley, and I'm talking from edge to edge, 200 feet. From the Dumas, roughly from the Dumas, all the way down to behind the M&L supply, where the entrance to was at Wyoming Street, I believe. So that's proceeding very well. Butte Silver Bow has been hauling and resupplying the salvaged bricks. The Public Works Department agreed to kind of safe keep, and that's been going well. The owners of the Dumas have provided the bricks that they had salvaged from previous alley work from about 2 years ago, and so all that's going back into the alley. We're going to have good drainage. We'll have a nice brick surface. We'll have concrete curbs on one side to address drainage. It seems like a win-win situation. The one area that I think is still a little bit nebulous at this point is, now that the work is looking so good on the east end of the alley, myself and Tom Loggins with the Public Works Department approached Northwestern and said, while you're at it, while you have a contractor on the site, there's a few areas along the west end of that same alley that weren't disturbed as part of this phase of the work, but appear to have been disturbed by previous excavation activity. Some of that I believe to be associated with Northwestern Energy. These are more like utility poles that have been put in. I think there's 3 of them. There's a service line that appears to have been cut. I think you'll see photos indicating that in my report. So I've asked Northwestern to consider repairing those patches so we have a whole 350 feet of fully restored alley for everyone to enjoy. And it's my understanding that and Mr. Baptist here can speak more to that. It's something that Northwestern is seriously considering at this time, but has not committed to yet. But in terms of the work that's been, the ground that's been disturbed by this most recent excavation activity, it seems to be proceeding very well, and I think we'll end up with a far superior product of historically intact, but more highly functional alley when it's all said and done. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Travis. Any of the commissioners have questions? Commissioner Moudry?
I don't have a question, I guess just a comment, and I'll make a motion. What a great example, Jim, of you and working with the other department heads to exactly what you said, turn what's potentially a black eye into a great product. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. So just reading the communication, I think Jim has basically addressed everything that was in this. So at this time, I would make a motion to note communication 14289, replace communication on file.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made to